Nobody on the ward remembers being sick. They just stay. I want to tell you about it while I can still remember that this is strange, because I can feel that getting harder. And I think there may come a point soon where I read this back and don't understand why I bothered to write it down. I went up to bring my sister home. That's the whole of it, at the start. That's the door I walked through. And it was an ordinary door, and I want to be careful to keep it ordinary in the telling, because if I make it sinister too early, you won't believe the rest. It wasn't sinister. That's the thing I most need you to hold on to. Nothing about it was sinister. It was lovely. The trouble is entirely that it was lovely. Mara had been at Marin House since the spring. She'd had, I'm going to call it a collapse, because I never got a cleaner word for it from anyone, including her, a wearing down. She'd stopped sleeping, then stopped eating properly, then one day she'd stopped at a junction in her car and simply not been able to make herself go in any direction and sat there until someone knocked on the window. After that, there were doctors, and the doctors used a lot of words, and the end of all the words was a recommendation. Somewhere quiet, somewhere out of the city, a convalescent place, a rest. Marin House came up. It had a good name among the sort of people who know about such places. Our aunt had spent a season there decades ago and spoken of it the way people speak of a holiday they never quite came back from, fondly, vaguely. So Mara went up to rest, and the arrangement was that she'd be there a few months, and then she'd be well, and then I'd come and get her. So I came and got her. That was the errand. I'd taken 3 days off work. I did something with logistics for a freight company, a job I could describe to you then in detail and find I can't quite now, which I'll get to, and I'd driven up on a Friday with an empty passenger seat and a playlist she liked, planning to fill the seat with my sister and drive her back down to her flat and her life on the Sunday. The drive up is the last part of the outside I remember clearly. I want to give it to you because it's proof, to me, that there was an outside. Motorway, then an A-road, then smaller and smaller roads, the kind that climb with the hedges getting higher until you're driving in a green trench and the light comes down in coins. Then the trees opened and there was the valley, and Marin House at the head of it, a long, low Victorian building of warm brown stone with a glassed-in veranda running the length of the south face, catching the afternoon sun so the whole front of the place glowed like something lit from inside. There were gardens going down to a stream. There were people in cardigans on the lawn. There was a smell when I got out of the car, cut grass and wood smoke from somewhere, and under it the clean, cold mineral smell of the stream, and I remember standing in the gravel and thinking, with the uncomplicated envy of a tired person, no wonder she got better here. A woman called Sister Aldous met me. Marin House kept the old language. Sisters, matron, the ward, though it wasn't a hospital in any way I'd understand the word. She was perhaps 60, soft-spoken, with the unhurried warmth of someone who has never once been late for anything because nothing there has ever needed to be hurried. She took me through to the veranda. They called it the sunroom, to wait for Mara, and she brought me tea in a real cup, and she sat with me a moment, and that's where the first wrong thing happened. Though it didn't feel wrong, it felt like good news. She's done so well, Sister Aldous said. You'll see. She's quite herself. I said I was glad. I said it had been a hard year, that Mara had been through a lot, that I hoped she felt the worst of it was behind her. And Sister Aldous tilted her head kindly, the way you do at a small mistake. Oh, I shouldn't dwell on the before if I were you, she said. She doesn't, you know. Hardly any of them do once they've settled. It's the rest that does it. The before just sort of lets go of you here, she smiled. It's a mercy, really. I took this to mean something reasonable. I took it to mean that Mara had healed enough to stop picking at the wound, that the place had given her distance from her bad year. That's a good thing. That's what rest is supposed to do. I drank my tea. Then Mara came in, and she was... Sister Aldous was right. Quite herself. Better than herself. She looked the way she'd looked years ago, before everything, before the city wore her thin. Rested, unhurried, her face open in a way I hadn't seen since we were young. She hugged me, and she smelled of the same soap as the whole house, a faint herbal smell I'd noticed in the corridors. And she held my face in her two hands and looked at me with such uncomplicated gladness that I felt my eyes go hot, because I'd been carrying the version of her from the junction, the version who couldn't choose a direction, and here was someone who looked like she'd never been afraid of anything. "You came all this way," she said. "Of course I did. I'm taking you home." And there was a pause. Not a frightened pause, a puzzled one. The pause of someone presented with a word in a language they used to speak. "Home," she said, trying it. And then she laughed, lightly, and looked around the sunroom, the long, warm, glassed-in length of it with the valley laid out beyond, and she said, "This is lovely, isn't it? Sit down. Have you eaten?" I sat down. I told myself she was just settling back into the idea of me, that the home conversation could wait until she'd had the pleasure of my arriving. We talked. It was a wonderful talk, easy and warm, and it was only afterward, driving the thing back through my mind, that I noticed what hadn't been in it. She never asked about anyone from outside. Not her flat, not her job, not the man she'd been seeing before the collapse, not our mother. She asked about me, but only the present me. How was the drive? Was I tired? Wasn't the light beautiful on the water, and never the me that connected to a shared past? When I mentioned things, she received them pleasantly, the way you receive a stranger's anecdote. "Do you remember?" I'd start, and she'd say, with a soft, agreeable smile, and it would slide off her, and we'd move on to how good the soup was. I want to be precise about what frightened me, when it finally did, because it wasn't a horror movie thing. She wasn't a husk. She wasn't pretending. She was happy. She was completely, warmly, genuinely happy, and present, and kind, and she simply had no purchase on the before, not on her illness, not on her life, not, I began to understand over that first evening, on me, except as a nice person who had come to visit. She didn't remember being sick, and she didn't remember being anything else, either. There was just Marin House, and the soup, and the light, and now me in it, and that was plenty. She clearly felt everything a person could want. I asked Sister Aldous about it that night, in the corridor, quietly, the way you ask about something you're afraid is bad news. Was the memory thing, was that normal? Was it the medication? Was it part of the collapse, the not remembering? And here is the thing that I keep coming back to, the thing that makes Marin House different from every frightening story you've ever heard. She didn't lie to me. Nobody there ever lied to me. There was no cover-up, no nurse with a secret, no locked file. She told me the truth, plainly, the way you'd explain the heating to a new guest. "It's the house," she said. "It's always been like that. People come here worn down to nothing, and the worn down part lets go. And once it's gone, they don't tend to want it back. Why would they? It wasn't doing them any good." She said it without a flicker of unease, as a simple description of a known process, the way you'd say the stream floods in March. The sickness goes, and then the reason for the sickness goes, and then, well, mostly they stay. There's nothing to go back for, you see. They've put it down. "But she has things to go back for," I said. "She has a whole life. She has me." Sister Aldous looked at me with great kindness, and I'll never forget what she said, because at the time it sounded like wisdom, and only later did I hear the trap folded inside it. "You can always visit," she said. "People do. I stayed the weekend in the visitors' wing, which was as comfortable as everything else. I tried, on the Sunday, to do the thing I'd come to do. I packed Mara's bag. She let me, amused, indulgent, the way you'd let a child pack you for a game, and I walked her down to the front hall, to the big door that stood open onto the gravel and my car beyond it. And here is the part that I most need you to understand, because it's the whole horror of the place. Nobody stopped me. There were no orderlies. There was no locked ward. The door was open. The car was 20 feet away. I could have driven her down the valley in 10 minutes. Marin House did not keep anyone. It didn't have to. Because Mara got to the threshold with her packed bag in my hand, and she looked out at the gravel and the car and the green trench of the road beyond, and she just stopped. The way, I realized with a lurch, she must have stopped at that junction months ago. Not afraid. Not resisting. Simply unable to find the reason to go through. She stood in the open doorway with the whole free world in front of her, and she turned to me with that same warm puzzlement and said, "But why would we leave? It's so nice here." And she drifted back inside, toward the sunroom, toward the soup, and I stood in the doorway holding her bag, and the door was open, and nothing on earth was stopping her, and she didn't go. I drove home alone that Sunday. I want you to note that I did drive home. I went back to the city, to my flat, to my freight logistics, to the whole machinery of my life. I was upset. I told a friend about it over drinks, and she said memory stuff after a breakdown was common, and I should give it time, and that sounded right. And I drank my drink. I had got out. The door was open, and I had walked through it and gone home. So whatever you're imagining about Marin House, that it's a trap that swallows you the moment you arrive, let that go. It's slower than that. It's so much slower and so much kinder. I went back the next weekend to try again. That was my choice. Nobody made me. I went back because she was my sister and I loved her, and I couldn't leave her up there forgetting her own life. And the second visit was as lovely as the first, and I tried again to talk her toward leaving, and again she received the idea like a foreign word and set it gently down. And I drove home again. And I went back the weekend after that. I'm going to tell you about the visits now, but I have to warn you that this is where my account gets unreliable, and I want to be honest about how it gets unreliable, because the unreliability is the thing itself. I thought I went up 4 or 5 times. The visitor's book says otherwise. There's a book in the front hall leather where visitors sign in. I'd signed it the first weekend without thinking. And one afternoon, I think it was the 5th visit in my count. I was waiting for Mara, and I idly turned back through the book, and I found my own name, in my own handwriting, on dates I had no memory of. Not 4 or 5 times. Pages of it. My signature, again and again, going back far longer than I believed I'd known the place existed, in an ink that started black and somewhere in the middle changed to the blue of the pen that lived chained to the book's little stand, as if at some point I'd stopped bringing my own. Now. In the story you're expecting, this is where I run to Sister Aldous and she tells me I imagined it, or the pages are blank when I show her, or everyone insists I've only ever come twice and I begin to doubt my sanity. That's not what happened. That's the old kind of horror, the kind that hides. Marin House doesn't hide. When I took the book to Sister Aldous, my hand not quite steady, and said I didn't remember signing half of these, she looked at the pages and nodded warmly and said, "Oh, you've been such a faithful visitor, more than most. It's good of you, all this coming and going." And then, with that same untroubled kindness, "Though it does take it out of you, doesn't it, the coming and going? You look tired, dear. You always look tired when you arrive. You never look tired by the time you leave." She wasn't gaslighting me. She was agreeing with me. That's worse. There was nothing to fight, because nobody was lying. The book was real and the visits had happened, and I simply didn't have them in my head anymore, the way Mara didn't have her illness, and everyone at Marin House regarded this as the most natural and pleasant thing in the world. The forgetting wasn't a symptom there. It was the amenity. It was what the place was for. I should have been frightened enough by the book to never go back. I want to tell you I was. But here's what I actually felt, standing in that warm hall with the herbal smell and the light coming long and gold through the tall windows, and I'm only able to tell you this because the writing of it is the one thing keeping me honest. I felt relief. The discovery that I'd lost whole visits, whole weeks, should have terrified me, and a small cold part of me was terrified. But the larger part, the tired part, the part that had been running the freight logistics life and the strained relationship life and the dying mother life for years without a real night's sleep. That part felt something loosen, felt the not having to hold it all. It was the feeling of setting down a bag you've carried so long you'd stopped noticing its weight, and only when it's down do you understand how it had bent you. That's the seduction, and I want to name it plainly so you can guard against it if you ever stand in a hall like that one. Marin House doesn't take anything from you by force. It offers you the chance to put it down. And everything you're carrying, your grief, your debts, your history, the people you've disappointed, the version of yourself you've failed to become, all of it is heavy, and you are so tired, and the house just stands there, warm and patient, and says, "You could put that down. You don't have to carry it anymore. Nobody here is carrying anything. Look how peaceful they are." I learned the other residents' stories over the visits I do remember, and they all had the same shape, and they all told them to me gladly, with no sense that the stories were sad. There was a man called Henry who'd been a teacher who'd come up. He thought, he said, smiling, for a chest thing years ago and got well and stayed. He didn't know how many years. "Does it matter?" he said, and I couldn't find the answer to that fast enough, and the not finding it frightened me. There was a woman, Margaret, who'd come, like me, to visit. Her husband had been a patient. He got well in his body but never quite found the reason to leave, and Margaret had come up every weekend to be with him, faithfully. The way I came up for Mara, and then her husband had died, finally, in his sleep, peaceful, years on. And Margaret had stayed. There was nothing to go back for, she said. Content, doing a jigsaw on the sunroom table. A jigsaw with one piece missing that nobody minded. She'd come to visit a dying man, and the man was long dead, and Margaret was still there, doing puzzles in the gold light, and she was happy. And she did not remember her house, or her town, or whether she'd had children, and none of this troubled her in the slightest. I looked at Margaret, and I understood what I was. I was Margaret, earlier. I was the faithful visitor, coming, and the coming was wearing a groove, and one day there would be no Mara to come for, or no me to do the coming, and I would still be there, and I would not remember why, and I would be happy. I tried to leave for good after that. I genuinely tried. I remember packing my own bag in the visitor's wing, with my heart going hard, telling myself I would drive down and not come back, that I'd send people for Mara, professionals, an ambulance, that I'd get her out by force if the door wouldn't keep her. And I went out to the car park and I found my car, and it was thick with dust and the leaves of more than one autumn. The tires soft, a green bloom of moss along the wiper blades, and I understood that it had been sitting there far, far longer than my count of visits could account for. The outside, when I tried to call it, my friend, my work, anyone, the outside didn't answer. My phone had died long ago, and I didn't, when I held it, remember the last time it had been alive, or whose numbers had been in it, or quite what I would have said. And the thing is, standing in that car park with the dead car and the dead phone, I wasn't frightened. That's how I knew it had nearly finished its work on me. I noticed the absence of fear the way you notice a sound stopping. I should be frightened, I thought, distantly. And the thought had no heat in it. It was just a fact about a person I used to be. The cold, terrified part of me had got smaller and smaller over the visits I couldn't count. And now it was a very small thing indeed, somewhere far back, and I could feel the warmth of the house at my back, and the gold light, and I could feel how easy it would be to just go inside, where Mara was, where the soup was, and sit down,